What's up, Ryan?
Hey, Jeff, how you doing? Good to be back.
I am good, man. It feels good to be back. It does. I know we did a one-off last week for Star Wars Day, but it's awesome to be back tonight. So, everybody, thank you for joining us. We've got a few folks in the queue with us. It's great to have you guys here. Thanks for joining the Kessel chat. If you're new to the show, post in the comments, say hi, let us know where you're coming from. As we go through, if you have questions, comments, feedback, just join the conversation. That's what this is all about.
Right on. Yeah, we're really glad to have everybody here. We're always it's a very fun time for us to be able to talk about Star Wars. I always think too, like Jeff and I, we have our normal job, and it's funny because we meet every day on a bunch of other stuff, and then we get to meet and talk about Star Wars. Although I won't lie, sometimes this ends up in the other world too.
Yes, it's happening more and more these days.
Including a little bit of tonight's topic, which we were already talking about earlier today, which I thought was a great idea. That was on you. I thought that was so smart. Talking about like the kind of motivations that kind of drive these Jedi Sith power battles.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So to kind of jump right into it, for anyone who caught the title, I had caught a video. Let's see here. Okay, to start off, we have like a fantastic comment already. Let me just expand this out here. So, Cisco DevNet,
awesome.
Who had the best telecommunications equipment, the Jedi or Sith? That is a fantastic question. That goes back to like Old Republic stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
I mean, I will say that the Jedi have some excellent network security, some solid IoT sensors, but I will say the Sith seem to have a lot in mobility. A lot of those round circle
The probe
ball
droids.
probes.
Yep.
Yeah, they can kind of make their way out pretty easily.
So you were talking about it before, like a
back.
sound you can't get out of your head, or like associate with something awesome. The Millennium Falcon breaking down. For me, it's that sound the probe droid said. Like, whatever that sound. I'm butchering it, but whatever that is, my son periodically will say something like that, and or he'll make some sound, and all I can hear is probe droid in my head.
It's funny. So another topic that Jeff and I were talking about before, even just like in the virtual green room, was just a lot of like the detail that's in Star Wars sounds and how that's there. On that telecommunications note, that probe droid and that sound when those probe droids are out there, especially on Hoth, is something that always stuck with me. And the heart of all of this conversation for Jeff and I came from there is a really cool feature in Disney Plus, and it's called Star Wars Biomes. And if you're familiar, if you have like an Apple TV and you play, like if you just let it go into like screensaver mode, it'll start showing like satellite images of like cityscapes or the ocean, downtown Saudi Arabia, you'll be, the coast of Australia. But one of the cool things is that Disney did that for Star Wars. And one of the biomes that you can see that pops up is Hoth. And I'm not gonna lie, Jeff, when it came up, I was like, I better hear a probe droid. And if I don't, this is not Hoth. And
right.
And so yeah, it came by and it was like, and it's just it was great. It brought me right back. I was in an immersive Hoth experience.
Yeah. It's almost as like if you're on Hoth, you need to hear both the probe droid and you get to hear a tauntaun, or whatever that sound is that tauntaun makes.
I love oh gosh, by the way, if you ever want to laugh really hard, watch Bill Hader. He's a comedian. He's on a bunch of shows now, obviously, but he was back in the day back on SNL, and he does an amazing tauntaun impression. And talk about someone who's dedicated to the detail of it. It's like one of the funniest, like wah, 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 wah. See, look, I'm gonna
You're
go for
it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go for it. It's that sound design. But yeah, to answer that question, I even though it might be a little dark side of me to say, I'm gonna say the Sith. I think the Sith have really like cornered that. Order 66 alone. I mean, their ability to collaborate, get that out there.
Oh God, talk about edge computing. Like they had chips in the clones' brains that were already prepped and ready to go for all. I mean, like all the computation was happening here locally in there. I mean, you don't get much more edge compute than that. Like some sort of fog computing orchestrator that Palpatine had back in Coruscant someplace. Who knows?
Welcome back to Star Wars IT Talk with Jeff and Ryan. Tonight we're going to be talking about telecommunications and also problems you might run into with your ATST.
That's an all-terrain scout transport for those of you who don't know. Just it only has 2 legs.
Oh yes, exactly. The chicken walker.
The chicken. Oh my God! I haven't heard that in so long. The chicken walker.
Oh yeah. That was how we used to call it when I was a kid. Yep. It was really funny too because like everybody can remember those from Jedi, but they're briefly in the background in the Battle of Hoth. They're there in Empire. And talk about like if you blink you'll miss it. It's like it's only there for just a moment, and it's not even like one of those things where they dropped it in the special edition. It's like there since 1980, and I always loved those things. I buy him on the planet of Hoth. I buy him apparently marching through the forests in Sonoma, Endor.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, Indoor. It's too funny. Okay, sorry. Tangent from our normal topic, or the topic we thought about for the night. The AT-ATs. in the Battle of Hoth, they're intense. You see them, they're big, they're larger than life, but for me, they're so far away physically from everything that even though Luke flies around and does his little like I shoot a rope at it, and somehow my tiny little cable takes down an entire AT-AT. Different conversation, whatever. They're out there on the field, and there's like 5 or 6 of them or whatever there is, and they're intimidating. They're interesting to look at. But the first time I saw one of them, I was like, oh hell, those things are legitimately frightening. Was in Rogue One when they're on Scarif.
Oh, yeah.
When they are on Scarif, they land on Scarif, and the rebel group is out there splintering, doing their thing, and then all of a sudden the Imperials finally like get their shit together, and they're like, okay, we're gonna go on the offensive, and I forget what his name is, but him and the two characters that are like the Guardians of the Wills, he hears the sound, and he's got the big like rapid fire machine gun, and he hears the sound, and he turns around, and all of a sudden the trees, like, it reminded me of like Jurassic Park when the trees parted and the T-Rex comes through the trees all of a sudden. That's what it looked like to me. It steps through, and it's like you hear this whirring of like, and it stops. It looks down, and you're like, oh hell, like shit's about to get real. And then all of a sudden, like, the blasters go to town and things start just exploding. Then like 3 more show up, but because of the trees and the way they was set up physically and the like lack of musical sound at that moment when it first showed, like, creates this impact, this emotional impact of like, whoo, like I would not want to be these guys on this beach, because right then previously they never really freaked me out. It's like, they're huge and lumbering, they're shooting, just run away, they can't catch you. Then you see this and you're like, oh my god, dude, like, I get it. These things are like terror machines for sure.
Oh, so when I was a kid, like, I was totally frightened of them. Also, wanted one as a toy. My cousin Thomas had it. Tommy, if you're watching right now, I was jealous of you way back then. The AT-AT was like totally frightening to me when I was a kid growing up, because I was like, oh my gosh, it just seemed unstoppable. And even when it appears briefly in like Return of the Jedi, where it's like it kind of walks by one of the ramp where they're delivering Luke to Darth Vader. I remember even seeing it then, and I'm like a little kid, and I was like, oh my gosh, they have one of those on Endor? That's terrible. Because I just thought, oh, they're just unstoppable. You can't stop these things. But what's really cool is, when I was a kid, we went to Disneyland one time that I can remember, and it was when Star Tours had opened, and it was like crazy exciting to go there for that. And if I recall right, and this is one of those things that from that scene that you were talking about in Rogue One, where the trees kind of split a little bit, and the AT kind of has its head poking out. So if I remember correctly, that is how the AT-AT looks, or looked, because I don't think it's there anymore, but that's how it looked next to the Star Tours ride. And I was even terrified to see it in real life. That was crazy. But that was one of those things that when I saw it, I was like, oh man, like I love, even now, like that sequence when they're coming out on the ice, that was like, oh, I was so freaked out by it.
The fog way out in the distance, and all of a sudden they just kind of poke through, and they, what is that? But the binoculars or whatever they call it, they're like, oh crap, like here it comes. I will say though, in that scene, it was sort of like they're so far away, and you're like, it reminded me of like Shaun of the Dead. Every time I mean, now it reminds me of Shaun of the Dead when the zombies come in, they're like, dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun, and because the things are so far away, like, are they ever gonna actually get here? Like, why are we freaked out about this? They're like 10 miles away, like they'll never. Anyway, so question, and AT-AT stands for, you want to take it?
I did. I actually went. I'm not gonna lie. I went just to make sure that I was not that I didn't have this incorrect. I remembered it as all-terrain armored transport, and I went to go make sure because I also remember it when I was a kid. They sold it as an Imperial Walker.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that that you could get it, and it was the Imperial Walker. See, that's what I mean. It was Imperial Walker, and then there was the Chicken Walker, and that was the ATST. But I had to go back. I just went to check. I was like, oh man, I don't want to be wrong on that.
Yeah.
Because that's like if you like mix up, phaser and disruptor in the Star Wars community, Star Trek community. Someone's gonna call, pull your number there. So it's funny because it's like a lot of those things are like some of my favorite callbacks. Like I love and that's what I kind of like to see in the sequel trilogy too. I love the little like references to that. I even like it in The Mandalorian. Like when the in The Mandalorian, one of the other favorite things that I have and a unique sound is the speeder bikes. I love the sound of that, all the and the little whistle that it makes. And so I love that appeared in The Mandalorian. I like that it's in even the prequels. But seeing like the AT-ATs and things like Rogue One, or even it's in The Last Jedi, like and it's done in the way to kind of show the scale of the really large, kind of the replacement, the New Orders, the First Orders version of the replacement walkers, where it's and it's got this like giant gun turret, like right at that like kind of cargo center. Still like one of my favorite sequences. I can go on and on about AT-ATs. One of my favorite sequences is in Empire. The Luke he's got to get out of his speeder. He's like, I gotta grab, and I'm like, get out of there. You gotta get moving. And he gets out and he sees the AT-AT and he shoots the cable all the way up and starts moving up the cable. Pulls out the lightsaber, throws the bomb in, disconnects, takes it out all by himself. It is like one of my favorite sequences. And just like in Rogue One, one of my favorite effects is the one that you're talking about, where he takes the bazooka and he shoots it at the face of the AT-AT, and then it turns and it looks back, and it's like, oh man, run.
Yeah, like
run right now.
Yeah, right. Just go. You need to leave right this minute. Okay, so we could just keep going off on this for a while, but we did have a pretty cool topic for tonight we wanted to dive into, because our show is a lot about storytelling. Actually, before I do that, so Lucas had a question a minute ago, and I want to clarify something with him. So, Lucas, you asked one question. I'm planning to start reading Star Wars HQ. What's best collection to start with? I don't know what you mean by HQ, but I do have this is technically not canon anymore since Disney bought it, but I will say I've read a number of different books from back in the day, and now not all pretty canon books, because there's tons of them. The Jedi Academy series was an amazing one for me. That was the one that they introduced Kip Duron and a lot of different cool characters. But the one series I would say for me was my favorite because it implemented, you get to see more of Luke as a Jedi, a young Jedi, not young Jedi, but like new to the Jedi role, trying to really figure out who he is and what he's doing. A lot of new characters. You first get introduced to Thrawn, is the Heir to the Empire series by Timothy Zahn. That's a fantastic series. It's a trilogy. You get introduced to Thrawn in that, and it's just a lot of diversity in character types and character arcs. It is not just about the typical space wizard Jedi thing. Like, Luke is there, and he is learning and trying to learn how to be a Jedi. He's out looking for other things related to that. But mostly it's not about his Jedi-ness in that story. Because the other characters, from my perspective, especially Thrawn, everything we've seen from him in modern times, especially like in Star Wars Rebels or in the books that come out, a lot of times it tries to paint him sometimes as a villain, or as purely a villain, as if it's binary, bad and good, and that's it. And in Heir of the Empire, for me, you really get a taste of his character is not bad or good. There is something else there, and all the current books with Thrawn start to show that too. But so for me, it would be Heir of the Empire, as that trilogy would be a great place to start. What do you think, Ryan?
I've got a couple of recommendations. One, I could +1 to Heir of the Empire. If you want to have a really good book series that you want to read, that's very well written. You can't go wrong with anything written by Timothy Zahn. I actually have a one that I've always really liked, and it's because it is the first book that comes out after the Star Wars novelization, which is right over my shoulder over there. And it's called A Splinter of the Mind's Eye. It is great because it is it's a book that's written before Empire. And it's a really cool book because there's a lot of things that are in it that are now canon, like kyber crystals, for example. So I would 100% recommend checking out that book. And if you want to see something new, Disney and Marvel have gotten really good at some amazing comic books, and so I would definitely recommend the Vader comic book series 100%. And you can start with Vader 1. It is a great comic book series, totally accessible, and a great way to start if you haven't read any of the Star Wars comic books.
Totally agree. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that helps, Lucas, but let us know if you want any more recommendations or if anybody else does. So our topic for tonight is, I saw this in a video that somebody did on YouTube at base. I saw this. And it made me think that since our show is a lot more about storytelling than simply Star Wars facts, anybody can talk about those things. What we like to talk a lot more about is the storytelling and how that connects with humans and their characters and the emotions behind it. And the video was a lot about why is it so often that games and comic or animated series and comic books, movies, the Sith Apprentices you see tend to feel like they have an outsized level of control or power in the Force relative to Jedi Knights or Jedi Masters they compete with or that they end up interacting with. And a prime example that, Ryan, you brought up, I think is the easiest one for all of us to remember because it happened within the last 20 years or so, is when Darth Maul fights against Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. Qui-Gon, arguably a great sword master in the story, very experienced. Maul, much younger than him, far less experienced. How was he able to go toe-to-toe with him so well? And what it got me thinking is, like, we could debate how strong Qui-Gon was actually in the Force and all those things, but what I thought might be interesting to talk about is that happens repetitively. Like, even Ventress, when she shows up, like, she's very young. Well, I think she's actually characterized younger than Obi-Wan, yet somehow she is so powerful in the Force and can control things and move them around. And if you watch other animated series, you see the same sort of thing happen. And it made me think, like, why would you do that? So we know the path to the dark side is through anger and fear, but really it's not just that. It is more about selfishness, and not selfishness as in, F you, I'm going to do whatever I want. It's not that. It's selfishness as in being completely inwardly focused. I'm not worried at all about what happens to other people. I'm only concerned about myself. Like the core emotion of or feeling of being selfish, not like I'm doing this because I want to screw somebody else over. I'm doing this because whatever action I'm taking is because it helps me. And at the end of the day, I'm all about me. And that's where the dark side users get most of their power, because things like something that says anger and fear and hatred leading to the dark side. I would say that's again too unnuanced a way to describe it, because it's much more about they're willing to be selfish about the power that they have and use it in whatever way they want. Whereas the Jedi tend to teach on the almost exact opposite side: don't ever use the Force. We're here just to study it and let it flow through us and let it use. And whenever we die, it's just our time and we go. And they're two completely different. Like, almost, they're polar opposite ways of looking at this thing that, as you hear it like that, at least for me, I'm like, dude, it's nothing in the world is like that. Everything is gray. I mean, everything is. And that's not a bad thing. Like, everything that we feel and deal with is gray. There's a middle ground for everything. But what it made me think is that why would you write a story where these youngish characters in their skills in the Force relative to characters that are much more experienced, why do they seem like they are so much more powered than we would expect them to be? Because we see what a Jedi Padawan looks like. And I was just like, from a storytelling perspective, why would you do that? I just thought that was an interesting thing to kind of dive into.
Oh yeah, and I think that's kind of like the heart of you want to create a really good example of a movie that understands how you match a protagonist and an antagonist is like The Dark Knight, right? I love The Dark Knight. You could use that as a case study for this is how you write a protagonist, this is how you write an antagonist. Because an antagonist, to really drive the protagonist to answer them, to really drive it as a challenge, the antagonist needs to be the exact opposite and have the exact opposite motivation as your protagonist. And so you look at like Batman and the Joker. And in that movie, Batman is a character that is driven by rules and control. And you have the Joker who and purpose. So Batman's got purpose. He's got a direct outcome, which is he's trying to apply order. And the Joker is a character that is the antithesis of that. Wants no rules, wants to break the Batman of having their rules, and that is looking to live in chaos. And believes in that chaos so much that that's where the collision of those two mindsets happen. And one of the things that happens, I always think in a lot of like the movies and Star Wars, is the culmination, of course, is the lightsaber battle, but really it's like philosophies where you're seeing like Yoda say something like, the Jedi use the Force for knowledge and defense, like never for attack. And that's something that you can see that always happens in all of these like kind of this is a game titled Jedi Power Battles. You see these in like Episode 1 and in all of the Star Wars movies and shows where you're always running up against power on one side versus experience on the other. And Jeff, I know you and I were talking about this earlier today, where it's like the great dichotomy of how this can break down. And I know Yoda says it about a lot of things already. Like Yoda describes the dark side as, it'll quick to join you in a fight, things like that. But one of the things that I always liked, and it's some pretty like hard talk that's happening between Luke and the Emperor, is Luke and the Emperor are sparring, verbal sparring. And then Luke says, your overconfidence is your weakness. And the Emperor says, your faith in your friends is yours. And that is the philosophy that these two groups are constantly fighting with each other. That one thinks, I'm never going to die. Literally, Palpatine's like, I'm never going to die. And then on the other side of that, you have I'm living for others. So it is a really a spectacular thing that then breaks down into we're going to take some big glow sticks and hit each other. But I love that as the nucleus of the story. One is around believing in yourself to this crazy extreme. Which affects people like Anakin and Palpatine and all these things where it's like I'm not just I'm overpowered, versus the other side, which is I'm so passive I'll let the river take me wherever it goes. And that's a really interesting philosophy, kind of both backwards and forwards when you start to see these two groups fighting each other. But yeah, I love this topic.
Yeah, dude, when we were messaging back and forth earlier about this, I read someplace, and I forget, I think it's actually mentioned in brief within the book Plagueis, which I think is technically non-canon, but happened right before the canonization changeover. And if you haven't heard of the book or you haven't read it, Plagueis is, and you can see it in the cover art if you go look it up, it's basically a very large side profile of Darth Plagueis, a moon, M-U, spelled M-U-N or Mun. I don't know, the banking clan basically. And
yes, the banking of the separatists, if you remember from episode 2.
Exactly. So you see a side profile and kneeling, and so it's like just his face, and then kneeling in front of him, small, is Palpatine. Kneeling in front of him. So Plagueis is Palpatine's Sith master. He's the one who made him a Sith or brought him into the dark side. And in that book, I believe it's touched on in brief. And basically, we hear it from Palpatine there. I've heard somebody expand on this, and I don't have it quoted, so I'm going to paraphrase. But essentially that the reason why Palpatine specifically, but dark side users or Sith, I shouldn't conflate the two. Dark Jedi and Sith are not the same thing. They both leverage the dark side of the Force, but they are not the same thing. We should probably do an episode about, story-wise, about like what, because I think it's actually, if you think back to Old Republic stuff, their Sith is actually a race that happened to be on a planet where they were consumed by the dark side in a way that they were symbiotic with it, but that didn't make them what was later called the Sith. Dark Jedi are something different, although they do both use the dark side. Anyway, Palpatine and even Plagueis talks about this, where their utter hatred. Plagueis doesn't feel as strongly about it, but Palpatine does, where he has an utter hatred for the Jedi, or any light. Actually, no, Jedi specifically, not just light side users, but any Jedi. And the reason for it is that because his needs are so selfish, like he thinks only inwardly. It also drives him to say, if there's a problem, I have literally the power to physically go change that problem. And I can decide if I'm going to go change that. And I can literally go affect change like this. I can walk into a place and mind control people to go do a thing that's in their best interest, whatever. I'm not here to debate whether that's right or wrong. I'm just saying he feels that he has that control because he physically does with the Force. Jedi feel like, to your point, I'm just Steve Jobs has said, your job in life is to put that boat in the river, that little like paper mache boat in the river, and just let these ideas and these contributions you make go into the world, and they flow. And when you're gone, they just get carried on by somebody else. That's how Jedi see it. And they don't ever want to step in. Like, worlds should have their own destiny and be able to run themselves. We're not here to change and influence a world. And Palpatine sees that as such a massive weakness of them, because he's like, if you can affect change, you should be affecting some change. If a group of people are starving, for example, if you were talking egalitarian, they're starving, and you can help them grow food by like influencing them in some way using the Force, then go do it. Why aren't you doing that? Then in his mind, obviously he is highly corrupted or corruptible, so his mind goes to a very dark place and does terrible things with it. But that's how he sees the Jedi, is this dogmatic group that refuses to step in and help and just wants to be scholarly and not provide aid to anybody and whatever else. That's how he sees it. And it's so interesting because, like you said, it's this very binary view of something that, as we know in real life, like nothing is that black and white ever. Like, and I think it's a great correlate to how all of us who live in our world, natural world, kind of see that, like, any situation you go to, politics is an easy one to look at. We won't dive into super deep, but if you look at mainstream political news, things are always typically framed, at least in America, on each side of the aisle. They always talk about it as did the two sides of the aisle come together, as if it's only this or it's this, and they have to meet in the middle or else nothing happens. And it's like, when you think about it in reality, like, what two human beings actually work that way? Like, no two human beings build a relationship where it's either this or it's this. It's we mix and we meet and we have a lot of things that are similar to each other and some things that are not. And that relationship comes from figuring out how to, be okay with each other's differences and then find a middle ground for each other. But I think that's such an interesting thing in the Star Wars realm, is that you get to see this very black and white or binary view between dark side and light side users, so that when you get characters like Ahsoka or whoever, who you can tell, or even Qui-Gon for that matter, who kind of end up, they call them gray Jedi, kind of play in the middle there, where they're not using the dark side, but they're definitely not like fully embraced in the sort of like everything is bright and beautiful and rosy, and I'm just going to sit here and like meditate forever and be lost in the cosmic force, and that's the end of it. Like, and I find that very interesting because it comes back to this idea of these Sith apprentices being so strong. They spend so much of their time learning to be selfish and embracing this power that they now have available to them, that I feel like it gives them this sort of like, Kyle, I think, actually said it really nicely in the chat, selfishness plus young angst. I mean, yeah, I think it is actually sort of a force multiplier, because it creates, like, when you get angry or you get worked up, adrenaline kicks in and you get extra strength or whatever else to take care of a situation. Well, imagine that if you had the Force in that same exact moment. Like, it would seem like your power in the Force is substantially greater than it probably is, but you're able to draw on this thing. But that's also probably why it corrupts their bodies so much so early on, is because they let that sort of thing happen so quickly that it consumes all this physical essence that they have. But they get a Force multiplier when they're early on in their sort of Sith career.
Oh yeah, no, you were talking about before about this, the issues that we face, the kind of the one side or the other. And when I was a journalist, there was a great concept that my very first editor talked to me about, and she said, Gloria Beveridge, if you're out there. Gloria told me that, Ryan, you always got to be careful about you always consider the tyranny of or and the genius of and. Or is such an eliminating, a dividing thing. And that's often how we have to look at these stories. is you have this character or that character, to borrow a line from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, who is it versus? Which is one of my favorite concepts. Sometimes I'm talking to my kids, and my kids are like, "Who is it versus? Who is it versus?" I'm like, no. The tyranny of or is really a thing where it's like that's the way a lot of stories are set up. But in real life, it's always the and. We're always a blend of these two things, and these are always like kind of extremist points of view, like your Jedi versus your Sith, where you have the extreme belief in yourself versus the extreme belief in a higher power, and that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, where of course you have to believe in yourself, and you also have to have your kind of faith in a higher power, something bigger than yourself. I actually think that one of the original intentions for the Qui-Gon character was that he was this gray Jedi, this Jedi that kind of walked that line, and they kind of abandoned that. You can still hear it a little bit in the script, like, oh, if you would just follow the practices, Master, you would be on the council yourself. And that Qui-Gon is kind of this model of a great Jedi, but I really think that model is someone like an Obi-Wan character. Who is a definite gray character, not so heroic as we like to imagine, and definitely not an evil guy, but walking that line pretty finely, where he's able to beat Anakin because he literally has the higher ground, and Anakin can't understand that and says, "You underestimate my power." So again, this kind of over belief in the self. But Obi-Wan is this character that recognizes a very important truth, which is that many of the things that we cling to are influenced by our point of view. And I think that for those people who have a problem with the Luke character in The Last Jedi, Luke is very much in that vein. Luke is very much aware of how the dark side and the light are one part, and that it's a balance that you're really kind of seeing between those. And that in all of these stories that we're telling, like in Star Wars and that we're seeing, it's at times not a true representation of what we're trying to get to, of this versus that, but it's really these extremist beliefs that are colliding with each other. And of course then take on the, it's an amazing lightsaber battle, but it's really this what is right versus what is wrong. These are often the kind of things that we're seeing in these battles, and it's funny. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I can go on and on.
No, it's great. But every time it's, as you were saying this over and over, that last thing you just said reminds me of something you brought up that Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan said when, as a Force ghost, he's talking to Luke, and he said, "I thought you said he killed my father." Well, Vader killed my father. Well, he did. From a certain point of view.
And
yeah, and that's
what like.
And you brought that up before. Like, that's exactly what this all is. Like, from a certain point of view, things can always be right or wrong from a particular point of view. Like, no individual is the villain in their own story. Like, no person, even in Star Wars, sits back and thinks of themselves as the villain. They don't go, Palpatine's not sitting back going, "I'm the bad guy and you're the good guy." Like, that's not how he's thinking of himself. So it's like, that's not how these people. So the idea of right and wrong is always from, you and I as people, and everyone watching this can agree that some things objectively in the real world are wrong. Murdering somebody is wrong. Like, that is not a good thing. We can objectively agree that is wrong. But in the course of a story, especially in something like Star Wars, if we take those very polarizing ideas of like something to that effect, which is even in that is still considered basically objectively bad. Everything else is subjective. It's subjective to the point of the view of the person that we're talking about. And you bringing up this sort of like black and white and then balance, which really the balance is the important part of the whole thing. Is when we talked about what Palpatine calls the Mortis gods, or the father, the son, and the daughter who live on the planet Mortis, and they're essentially a Force nexus. The daughter embodies physically pure light side. The son is pure dark side, and the father is literally in the middle, maintaining the balance between his father or his daughter and his son. And every day, the planet that they live on transfers from light during the day and dark at night. And during the day, everything flourishes and beautiful, and all the planets live. And as soon as dark darkness comes over, everything dies and burns and whatever else, and it refreshes every single day on a constant cycle. And it's not portrayed in their space as bad or good. It's portrayed as, this is what the light side looks like, this is what the dark side looks like. But they have to be maintained in balance, because that's how a world, you can't have one without the other. They have to both exist. And that's something I loved about the part after after that line that Obi-Wan says to Qui-Gon about, if you would just follow this, you'd be on the, or whatever, you'd follow this and you'd be on the Council Master. And he goes, Obi-Wan, I will do what I must. And I love that.
Exactly.
And I love that, because he's like, to me, he's actually the embodiment of what the Jedi should really be, which is the idea of, if you just follow this rule to be on the council, it's like, that's a very selfish thing. Why would you seek that? If you're not supposed to be selfish and completely selfless, why would it even matter if you got on the Jedi Council? Why would that even be a thing to aspire to? Why do you even have aspirations other than to simply learn more and be good? So for me, that was like, even hearing that conversation was an indication that even at that point in the Jedi's feelings of the light side and what they see their purpose in the galaxy is, they've already started to go down that path. Because if you're looking at that as a position of something I want to aspire to, it's like, I thought you're a Jedi. You're not supposed to aspire to or desire to aspire to anything. Like, that's what you say you are, but yet you're chastising your master for not aspiring to something if he just did something a little different. And he literally says it. He's like, I'm going to do what the right thing is that I see as this moment, and that's to help this child.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, oh no, totally. I gotta say that, and it's funny too, because it's like, I think, obviously Star Wars is built as a parallel to a lot of things that we encounter in life. Like, I mean, even the Jedi religion itself, you can and it's not too far of a reach to say it's a religion. It's very dogmatic. And I think it is, in fact, a religion in certain countries. The thing that you can also see in it is, of course, you can see Eastern philosophies. You can see Islam in Jedi. You can see Christianity in Jedi. The prayer of Saint Francis is very much aligned with the motto of the Jedi, where there is not death, there is only the Force, which there is a reverse for the Sith as well. And so it's an interesting parallel to a lot of the type of kind of the polarizing things that we encounter in our society today. And in fact, you could say that oftentimes these conflicts that we see that aren't as dramatically portrayed as they are in Star Wars are just as fervent. Like, they're just as passionate, that people feel this way, either that, to believe one way or to believe another. And I often do think that it is this kind of finding that balance between selfishness and selflessness, that one has to find individuality, what one's role is within a group. A good example of this, by the way, not to keep mixing in, I've talked about the Batman, and I've talked about, I think I even had a Star Trek reference in there, is a show that I will often bring up, which is one of my favorites, which is Avatar: The Last Airbender, or Korra, The Legend of Korra, I'll also throw out there too. But in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Aang is having to decide if he is going to be in the world, if being in the world means that he has to be of the world. And this is a hard thing for him to kind of balance, because like the Jedi, he feels this desire to be selfless, to be unconnected, and yet is wildly passionate about very specific things. He even keeps going back to other avatars before him and saying, what should I do? And they're trying to influence all of his decisions. In fact, so many people are. And in the end, it comes down to what he believes that he has to do, how he can stay true to himself. And I think that is kind of the old literary tale. And in fact, all heroes in all of their journeys go through this, which is the understanding that they must stay true to themselves. And in that process, they also might have to change. And that truth might change. And you see that in Star Wars with the character of Luke Skywalker. You see that even if you look at episodes 1 through 6 of what happens to Anakin, that staying true to oneself is very important, but that truth, that inner truth, that might change. And so you might have to change with that. Yeah. I really like the Star Wars universe because it is an extremist interpretation of that internal conflict that you can see played out among groups every single day.
Exactly. I think we had a little issue with Ryan's video there. He'll be back, I'm sure, in just a second.
Important stories are the most. Oh, I'm sorry. I think my audio might have cut out there. Yeah, but I'll say that. William Faulkner said the most important story that we can tell is the human heart in conflict with itself. And that's what this story is. That's what Star Wars is. We are getting deep into the Kessel chat tonight as we talk about this. This is going to be a Jedi Power Battles discussion. It is.
I feel there's like a celebrity death match happening in my brain right now, but for Jedi or for Sith. This has been awesome. And one other question came up, and I definitely want to put this up here. Kyle Winters asked, is Grogu considered a Jedi apprentice? He is seemingly able to outclass any Sith apprentice in terms of power, but lacking the grip on his own power to do so. It's a great question. I think actually in this story, he would be considered to be a youngling. So not a Padawan. Yeah. He isn't. So in the hierarchy, youngling is there's actually, I think, a level below youngling when they're newborns and first brought to the temple. But youngling is basically they are being trained up to a point, and then a master or a Jedi Knight or an existing master can then say, at a certain ceremony they go through, I'd like to take that one on as a Padawan. And when they do that, they become a Padawan, which essentially means apprentice. A Padawan just is a synonym for apprentice in the stories. But prior to that, they are considered to be a youngling. They're learning, they're teaching, they're growing up to not 10 or 11 years old or 12 years old or whatever age they can become an apprentice. But no, he'd be considered to be a youngling. His age doesn't matter because he ages so differently from all other beings. But he is still technically a youngling because he has to be taken care of like he is a human child, simply because of the way his age works. That we understand so far.
No, and again, I think what's really interesting too is that Ahsoka talks all about how she's worried about his level of attachment, and I thought that was such an interesting issue to be concerned about. And again, it's like, how far could that attachment lead him to a fear of loss, like Anakin? Could that attachment, though, be an inspiration, very similar to what you see with Luke? Luke feels very attached to wanting to save his father and is willing to sacrifice himself for it, and his father's willing to do the same for him. Yep. So I think that it's a really interesting concept that attachment is kind of a lightsaber that cuts both ways. So yeah, I really, that's a great question, Kyle. I really like that.
Yeah. Well, awesome, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's been a fantastic discussion. Stuff like this for us, whenever we do these topics, it's awesome because these things, again, they're always very nuanced, and there's so many places we can go to kind of like create this sort of, it's basically in storytelling, the idea of world building. We're sort of doing some world building to set up the stage for the story and the things we want to talk about, because in order to understand something that seems innocuous or a simple topic like, why would a Sith apprentice seem like they're so much more powerful than a Jedi Knight or Master? And we can go through a lot of other details like, well, they're trained to fight in battle from youth because they're always trained to have combat or be in conflict with the Jedi, whereas the Jedi at this point in time don't even believe the Sith are around anymore for the most part and don't train like that. They have a lightsaber, but they're trained not really to ever use it, etc., etc. But we have to talk about these other kind of bigger and more existential things because it helps set up why you would even use these elements in a story to carry that along, which I find is just amazingly fascinating. So, as we wrap up, Ryan, any parting words other than a lightsaber will cut both ways? Because as Paul just, I think, clearly indicated in the in the chat, like, I think this is our quote for the night. It's perfect.
Yeah, you gotta put that on a t-shirt. The only thing I'll say is this. One, of course, you can follow me on Twitter. You can follow the Kessel chat on Twitter as well, and on Instagram. We really thank everybody that has been sticking with us tonight, asking us some amazing questions. And I'll also point out that, Jeff, I think we've got some really cool homework for all of our viewers on the Bad Batch. If you want to take it from here.
Okay, so yes, I won't take a ton of time on it, but if you haven't watched The Bad Batch yet, which is streaming on Disney Plus, episode 1 came out on Star Wars Day. It was 70 minutes long. Episode 2 came out that same Friday, which was last Friday. It was a typical length, I think 25 give or take minutes of viewing time, which is like the same length as like Rebels and Resistance and the Clone Wars, all the other animated series. So to set the stage, in the final season of the Clone Wars the first like 3 or so episodes, they did a mini series on this group called the Bad Batch, or Clone Force 99, which is a batch of clones that were basically genetically modified to be genetically different to a degree than the other clones. So all the other clones are completely identical to each other. The Bad Batch are not, and each of them are engineered for a different purpose. Hunter, who's the leader, has like super enhanced senses, so he literally can sense the like ley line type sensor. He can sense the environment around him almost like he can sense the Force, but it's more of like a hunter. He can hear things, he can see things, smell things, and put these senses together to figure out what's actually happening around him, like so far beyond what any other sentient being probably could do. You have Tech, who is so brilliantly smart that he can like figure out any tech problem and get into any system like at the drop of a dime. Like he figures all these technical things out super, super fast. You have Wrecker. I want to blow things up. He actually hit a line in the first episode of the Bad Batch is, I like to blow things up because I like to blow things up. He literally says it with that level of emphasis. It's freaking amazing. He was talking about being manipulated. And then the last one is Crosshair. The last official one in the Clone Wars was Crosshair. He's a sniper. Not just a sniper, but his role is to be the sniper. And then Echo, who is a former clone, joins them. There's a whole storyline. Anyway, in the first 3 episodes or 4 episodes of the final season of the Clone Wars, they introduce the Bad Batch, and then they kind of disappear. And Echo goes with them, and it's an ending. And you kind of get the feeling that that's going to happen again. The Bad Batch series literally takes place right when Order 66 happens. And so you actually get to meet Caleb Doom, as most people know as Kanan Jarrus from Star Wars Rebels. You get to meet him when he is a Padawan to Depa Billaba, his master. And you see her die, and you see that happen that we've only heard about in Rebels and in other places. It starts right there. But the difference here is that the Bad Batch, because they're genetically modified, for the most part, the group of clones, the chip that's in them that creates the manipulations and the things that make them who they are, the Order 66 doesn't arrive for them. It doesn't process for them. It doesn't trigger any behavior in them. But all the other clones around them start behaving differently. They start behaving as this. But they're clones. Even though they are the Bad Batch, even though they are different and seen as different, they can also see the difference in their clone brethren around them, as they call them the regs, or the regular clones. And so when they show up, they keep going about their thing, like, oh, okay, what's happening here? But Hunter's like, something is just weird, man. Something's off here. We don't know what's happening. And the story picks up from there. It's interesting to me for a number of reasons, and the homework is everyone needs to go watch this. You need to go watch it. Matt Saunders, who's in the comments right now, I'll put it up here. He and I talked about this. He chimed in on a previous Kessel chat when we first talked about the Bad Batch. That was a month or 2 away, and he's like, dude, I don't know. I didn't really like them, and I get it, dude. I totally get it. I still understand it. But after he watched it too, you can see here on the screen, he's officially a Bad Batch convert. It's, again, we're going to talk about this next time after you, Ryan, have done your homework and watched them, because
I know I'm behind. I will say this: I've watched as much as I can, and I will say I love visual references within Star Wars. And one of the things that came up that I was able to see in the Bad Batch was a visual cue from The Force Awakens, which I was like all about. And anyone who's seen The Bad Batch knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's from the end of The Force Awakens. And I love stuff like that in Star Wars. It is great when it's self-referential. But Star Wars like invented meta. So like anytime that kind of stuff happens, I'm all about it. When I saw the Godfather 2 ending of or Godfather 1 and 2 of The Last Jedi, I was all about that too. So yeah, anytime we get that type of references, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the homework to everyone is go watch The Bad Batch. At least watch the first episode. If you can, go back to the Clone Wars Season 7. If you've got Disney Plus where you can watch it anyway, just go back to the Clone Wars Season 7. Watch Season 7. It's brilliant. You learn much more about Ahsoka and how she gets to where she is. You learn about The Bad Batch. Then go watch The Bad Batch. And we're going to talk about that, I think, probably on the next Kessel chat. It is my favorite new animated series because I've said this before about Rogue One and about Solo. We are getting to see the very real and the very human side of how people are affected when these larger galactic events occur. And I think that is so important because I love the Jedi. We all love the Jedi. We love that, all this stuff that we've talked about. But at the end of the day, where all of us as people can connect is what do other humans or other people view the world as? These, and they don't view it as these huge problems. They view it as the world that's right in front of them. But then when they're conflicted with these big things that they can't have any control over, what do you do? And we all feel that in our daily job when like bigger changes and bigger things happen at the company you work at that you can have zero control over. It makes you feel really like oh god, like anxious and freaked out. Well, imagine what you're like. You put yourself into the position of this character. This big huge thing happens that they can't have any direct control over, but then stuff starts happening around them. What do you do? How do they deal with that? And watching it for me, I can see so many of my own emotions and what each of these personified characters is going through. So I would say everyone go watch it, at least the first episode. If you can, catch all of it, because you should. It's just amazing. And then next week, hopefully next week, if Ryan's done his homework. I'm kidding. We will like nosedive directly into it for part 1, at least part 1. We'll see.
I'm taking notes. I'm going to be taking a lot of notes, and we're going to come in and we're going to do deep dive into The Bad Batch. I'm one of these people that I commit all the way. This is exactly like with all of my streaming shows that I watch. I know this is going to sound crazy. I typically wait until all the shows are available, and then I just binge them all at once because I have no patience anymore. I have no ability. I have no self-control. That's why this episode's running over, by the way. Because yeah, it's so hard for me. I can't believe we grew up in a time when you had to wait week to week, or oh my gosh, a summer for like the next season to start of a show.
I forget about shows now. If a show has a summer, like my wife watches things on Hulu, it'll come out in the summer. Like we used to love watching Bob's Burgers. And I look back, I'm like, was the show canceled or something? She goes, no, it's just off for the season. I'm like, oh, I totally forgot that was even a show anymore. Like, if it's not going to be regularly talked about, like, okay, we could do this. We got other shows to do it. We're going to have to pause for now because we've already run way longer than we usually like to. Ryan, thanks for being here, man. You can find me also. Ryan did his call out. You can find me at the at Jeff Boltech on all the social medias. Follow the Kessel chat. We do this every Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. Oh, and note, if you do need some additional reading, Ryan gave you some suggestions, but new just dropped literally Tuesday. Yeah. You have issue number 5 of Star Wars: The High Republic. And issue number, I think, 4 of The High Republic Adventures will be out in a couple weeks. And the prelude book to the series I've talked about a few times, War of the Bounty Hunters, just dropped today as well. So that's out. There's actually an alternate cover as well, but this just dropped out on Tuesday as well. Everybody, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you sticking with us for almost an hour. And Kyle, I know, said that 50 minutes went by fast. It does go by really fast when you just get talking. Thank you guys so much for sticking it with us. We really appreciate it. Follow us on here on what am I trying to say? Here on YouTube. We're on YouTube, right? Yes, we're on YouTube. Yeah. Follow us here on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, hit subscribe. It really helps us out. Like the video because that does get us bumped up in the rating. And if you want to get notified, hit the little bell, or I'll ping all of you guys on all the social medias and let you know. Have a great night, Ryan. We'll see you soon.
Hey, thank you so much. Hey, good night, Jeff. Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.